Hello, Beth here. Welcome to the Write Club podcast, the pod that takes you behind the pages and into the fascinating world of writing. And as always, I've got fellow book addict Mary with me. Hi, Mary. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by international best-selling author Lucie Whitehouse. Lucie is the author of acclaimed psychological thrillers, including Before We Met, a Richard and Judy book club pick, and Critical Incidents, which introduced readers to Birmingham detective Robin Lyons. Her work has been praised for its gripping plots, emotional depth, and razor-sharp explorations of power, family, and justice.
Yes, and she's back with Last Witness, the third in the Robin Lyons series. Set against the backdrop of Birmingham, it's a tense and timely story about corruption, influence, and the cost of seeking the truth. Already described as compelling and unputdownable, it is a must read for fans of crime fiction that goes just beyond the surface. Lucy, welcome to the Right Club podcast. Where are you joining us from today?
Thank you for having me. I am in Brooklyn. I'm at my desk, which is in the corner of my bedroom, glamorously enough. I live in Crown Heights, which is a very lively part of Brooklyn. It's really interesting. We live just across the road from the museum and the botanical gardens, and key for me, 8 minutes walk, and yes, I have timed it, from the huge central library here. And this, I've lived here, as you can hear, I'm British, but I've lived here. My husband's American, for 15 years. So yeah, this is definitely home. And my little desk here is one that my husband, who's also a writer, bought for me. We got married, and then because of some residency issues and visas, we I had to wait for my green card before I could move here permanently. But when I arrived, Joe had bought me a desk, and that's the one that I write on still.
Oh, how lovely. And did you meet through writing?
Yes, actually, we did in a very indirect way. When I had finished my second book, I just handed in my second book, and I had also been doing 3 day a week publishing job. But I've been covering somebody else's maternity leave. So when I finished that job, my agent at the time said to me, before you get another job, why don't you go and have an adventure? Fill up writing, your kind of writing reserves with some new interesting material. I think she just read Eat, Pray, Love, so she was probably thinking, go to Rome. But I thought
And
it's
yourself.
actually, I thought it's actually a really good idea because at the time I just got a tax rebate because when I started publishing, I was over anxious about saving enough money to pay my tax bill and had way overdone it. So the combination of the two things seemed like a sign. And I thought, okay, I will. I'll go for just for 3 months. And rather than go to Rome, I'll go to New York. because I'd always had a feeling that I might end up living here for a little bit. And I thought this will be my opportunity. So I came here, and so I had a few people that I knew in New York, but not very many. So I thought, so I'll have something to do that's structured once a week. I'll do an evening class at NYU, and I did. Uh, and it was a course in writing dialogue for in novels, but also for stage and screen, which I don't do and have never done, and I'm not sure I could do. But it was fascinating to see that side of it. And the guy who taught the course was amazing. It was really funny, one of the best teachers I've ever seen. And about halfway through the 6 week course, he said, "Come, I've written a play. Come and see this play." And when I got there, he was sitting next to this incredibly handsome guy in the audience, and I thought, hmm. And he introduced us afterwards, and the handsome guy is now my husband. So
Oh,
yeah, we
that's such a lovely story.
yeah, we met that night, drank far too many cocktails, and yeah, that was it. We've been
Oh,
together ever since.
Well, I'm sorry, Beth, but I'm off for an adventure now. I'm inspired.
Completely understandable. I don't mind.
Yeah, it was. I remember the day before just thinking, my God, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. But it was worth the risk.
Wow, what a story.
Yeah, it was
So,
fun.
yeah, that's amazing. So congratulations on the release of Last Witness. For listeners who haven't yet picked it up, could you give us a snapshot of the story?
Yeah, sure. So the story is set in Birmingham, where all the Robin Lyons books are set. And it starts when the body of a teenage boy is found in Moseley Bog, which is an area of city woodland in Birmingham. It's actually where Tolkien got his inspiration for Hobbitland in The Hobbit. The boy when Robin comes to the site to see the body in situ, she immediately realizes that this is going to be a very difficult case because the boy is one of three teenagers who had been involved in a very high-profile sexual assault case. The boys, not as perpetrators, but as witnesses in a case. Who had supported a girl who their friend Molly, who they'd seen be sexually assaulted. But in the course of standing up for her and testifying in court, they'd come under huge criticism and physical attack from a very powerful local family whose son was the sexual assaulter. And so it looks like this case is alive again. And because of the nature of the family, and I should also probably say that with Robin, one of the things that I love to do with the Robin books is explore kind of how bigger politically thematic things also affect people on a personal level. And in Last Witness, the central question, which is really one of justice and who gets to decide what justice is and is it different for different people, actually has a very a very personal application to Robin in this book because her daughter's also in legal jeopardy, and her daughter Lenny, who's obviously the light of her life, is only 15. So there's lots at stake.
That was something that I was just going to add actually, is that I found there was such a great detailed backstory and like different side plots kind of going on whilst this main thread was kind of happening, and I found that really it helped keep me engaged throughout the whole book, and I literally read it in two sittings.
Oh, thank you. That's so lovely to hear. I think that's the nicest thing that you can hear as a writer of particularly of crime novels, when pace is really important. And I think that's the reason I got into writing, because I love that experience of just being not able to put something down. So to hear that was so lovely. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's massively important within crime novels to
Mm,
make sure as well that there's no kind of plot holes, because if you
mm,
can overcomplicate it, which is very easily done because you can have so many different ideas and they're all brilliant and you want to include them all, it can
mm.
make it so much more difficult to kind of stay on track with the message that
Yeah.
you're trying to get across. And I think the way that you wrote it, you kind of did it like you didn't add too much that it was completely confusing and nobody was going to know, but you also kept everybody guessing throughout the book, and one minute you think
Excellent.
you absolutely know what's right and what's going to happen, and then the next minute that theory's completely turned on its head, and that's the perfect way to kind of write a crime novel.
Oh, thank you. I in my writing, when I started, I never used to plot. I used to, I think particularly when you start, you think, can I do this at all? Write something full length, because novels just are long. I always think of I love the Truman Capote quote. He says, "Well, can't remember the words exactly. It was like, oh, nobody tells you how much typing's involved." And it's a novels, yes, lots of writing, but it's just the typing, they are long. Kind of the average crime novels roughly, 90,000. Used to be longer, but the trend these days is for shorter novels. Um, but so I always, when I started, my first couple, I started writing and then just saw where they took me and edited them afterwards. But I think we're living in sort of a golden age of crime writing, really. There's some really, really brilliant crime writers at work today. So if you want to, make sure that your book passes muster, you really have to, kind of be on your game when it comes to the plotting. And so I plot my books in advance now, but it takes me ages. That's kind of, I always feel a bit guilty, like I'm not actually working. I'm just sitting around, biting the end of a pencil or going for a walk for 3 months. But that's where a lot of the real work happens. So yeah, and it's fun. I love that. I love kind of setting up an expectation and then turning it on its head, and it's
How do you do that process? Do you have lots of different, do you have charts or do you have different documents? I'm always intrigued at how the timelines work and how people are going to work in the red herrings and
well, I'm quite simple, I think. I'm a real pen and paper person. I have never done one of these, no doubt, you and your listeners will have seen these crazy walls of post-it notes and like kind of murder boards in the detective kind of world. But I have a Word document and can't see it on the podcast, but this is the one for Robin 4, which I'm just finishing now, and it's 16 pages long with every kind of major development. And obviously a lot changes in the writing, and that's part of the fun of it. And you can add all kinds of, as you get to know the story better yourself, you can add kind of little details that think, oh, actually that's really fun. I could put that in too. As so you do get the joy of discovery still, even if you have plotted quite carefully in advance. But yeah, I sit down and my outlines are really telling the story to myself in short form.
Oh,
Um,
brilliant.
yeah, so that's
That's really, really fascinating and interesting for our listeners to know because everyone does it kind of differently.
they do. And there's no right way. I think the only right way is what works for you. And that's you know, it's always interesting to know how other people do it, because then you can learn from them, or if you find somebody whose process is, similar to yours, it thinks, oh good, well that works for them, so it's got to be all right. But yeah, there's no wrong way to do it. But that works for me. Telling myself the story. I mean, it's all written out in sentences, sort of. They speak to Matthew Kemp again and ask him whether he'd ever known a Georgina. This is so it is that basic. But yeah, other people use Scrivener, kind of plotting software, but I've never even seen what it looks like. Um, as my daughter says, I am old.
As long as you found something that works for you, I guess that's like you say, that's all that matters.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and you mentioned earlier that the novel explores networks of power, influence, and justice, as well as Robin's own family struggles. Why did you choose those kind of themes, and what were you most keen to explore in this novel?
Um, I think entitlement, kind of as people's sense of entitlement is something that runs through all my books. Actually, it's something that really bothers me. And I think there is this idea that there's, writers have two or three themes that they come back to over the course of their books and explore them in different ways over the years. And entitlement's definitely one of mine. The kind of sense, particularly with the Hayward family in this book, the idea that, their wealth and position in the city enables them or entitles them to sort of live on a different level, so above the law. Sort of phone up your friend who's the assistant chief constable and get him to have a word with the man who's running the investigation. Which, obviously in my mind is deeply, deeply wrong. And it's something I think about all the time because I live in Trump's America, which is, I mean, it's shocking to me. Absolutely. I mean, every day there's something that under a normal government would be the kind of outrage that would cover front pages for months, and it's every day. And I mean, he is just the absolute kind of embodiment of entitlement, both as white supremacy, obviously. So this entitles us to, hold ourselves above everybody else. The wealth does. Yes, I'm fascinated by people who think they just automatically, should be treated differently to other people. Whether that's based on, money or gender, race. It's Yeah, I just find it astonishing. I think I don't know, and the lack of empathy it involves. I'm fascinated by empathy as well, and how people are able to do these shocking things. I think I'm slightly worried that well, we're seeing it already, but I I'm very worried about how dark things are going to get. And so exploring this in fiction is definitely something I wanted to do. And also I mean, this is a theme that comes up for Robin in the book as well. There's the sort of the grand level of the main storyline, but it's also echoed in Robin's storyline. I'm also really interested in, is there a difference between justice and the law? And what's the right thing, and is it what the law says? How it all sounds very dry, but hopefully it isn't. It's Yeah, so entitlement and basically the world we're living in. And I think when I started thinking about this book too, one of the main threads of the story, my two witnesses and the victim of the sexual assault that starts the story, they afterwards, having discovered how difficult it is to get a successful prosecution in a rape case, they set up a sort of online kind of website. It's like Everyone's Invited. When Everyone's Invited launched, I found that fascinating too. And I think when I'm writing, and I know so many other people who say the same, it's like when kind of new ideas and ideas for stories come from other ideas or disparate ideas colliding. So when two things meet and you think, so entitlement, but also this website where there could be a sense of community, where people who can talk about things that they might find very difficult to talk to people they actually know about, but can find that sense of community in an online forum. But that with entitlement and just the ideas kind of silt up. So that's where that came from. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, it's brilliant. And I think a lot of the themes that you kind of talk about in the book are some of them are very like polar opposites. If you look at like you say, the Haywood family that are privileged, they've got a lot of power. And then you've got the school kids who have absolutely no power whatsoever. And all they're trying to do is help this girl. And like you say, they created that strength in numbers website forum thing so that everyone could kind of share their experiences and show that they're not alone. And I found those two completely separate group of characters really fascinating. And I also found it really frustrating with without giving too much away and spoiling anything, how much the Haywoods just disrespected Robin, and
Mm,
were very much like, well, if there's a male officer, then maybe they'll do a better job,
yeah.
and things like that. And it's one of those things where it is escapism, but there is a lot of kind of threads within in the novel that happen in real life. So it kind of makes it a little bit more relatable in ways as well.
Oh, that's good to hear. It's I think quite a lot about that too. The thinking specifically about Robin, and the yes, "Oh, get a man in here, do the job properly." I mean, it's so frustrating. I mean, no, she's since she's been working in homicide, enforced homicide in Birmingham. She's cleared up all sorts of difficult cases, and yet she's still got this. These old duffers coming and go, "Oh, well, let's get the men involved." I mean, aren't we past that? And I mean, I think if we're thinking about today, we are really not past it. And yeah, it's alive and kicking for sure. So that's something that I wanted to put in as well. So
It's
yeah.
brilliant. And Bennett's death links back to a previous act of shocking violence, like you mentioned, and again the powerful family. What, where did you get that initial kind of idea and storyline from?
Oh God, this is a really difficult question. Um, in my old life, before I started publishing my own books, I was lucky enough to work with Leslie Pierce, the writer Leslie Pierce, and she said that when people say, "Where do you get your ideas from?" She always says, "Oh, when you get your first book deal, they give you an 0800 number to dial, and if you get a bit stuck, you can phone them up." I have no idea is the honest answer to that. Um, I'm not sure. I mean, sometimes I'm just walking along and I find walking brilliant. I mean, everybody says it, but it is true that when I'm plotting and thinking, going for a long walk really does help. I think it's the rhythmic motion of feet kind of gets you into sort of deeper level of thinking. It's kind of meditative um, kind of frame of mind that helps. I don't know where the idea for the kids, the teenagers, or
Yeah,
the
the actual kind of thing that sparks the whole story. So the three kids that are trying to get justice for the girl, and like that whole kind of starting point that makes eventually,
yeah,
well, basically ends up with Ben dying.
yes. Um, I think the idea for that, well, this is probably another example actually, well, it is another example of how kind of different ideas collide, and then in the colliding kind of make something interesting. Um, the there's a everybody talks quite a lot about why are murder victims so often female. And I did think, yes, it would be interesting to have a young male victim who's not just dead as a result of knife crime or gang violence, but something more complicated and more nuanced than that. So I thought, yeah, I'd like a male victim this time. Also, I wanted to explore the idea with the trio. It's there's many different threads, but I think one of the important things with this young crew was to have these two boys who are very empathetic and brave. Um, and so I wanted to do that, but then I wanted also to I think this comes from, I noticed, I can't remember, somebody was talking to me and said, "Oh, were you inspired by David Hogg, who over here at the shooting in Florida at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, the one of the classrooms that they attacked were older teenagers, and there was this group of really brilliant, really politically minded teenagers who then went on to campaign for gun control. And one of them has now gone on to build a kind of political career out of that, and which some people have feelings about. So that, he shouldn't have in some way profited from what happened to him. But I would very much question the definition of profited in that situation. But yes, it was interesting to me. I mean, always the kind of good intentions going wrong. I'm always interested by. So yeah, that's the long answer.
I wanted to ask you about your recent piece for Writing Magazine, where you broke down the differences between crime and psychological suspense. When you're starting a project, how do you know what genre it's going to belong in?
It was writing the piece for Writing Magazine was really interesting because I can feel it, but I've never actually I can feel the difference, but I'd never sat down and worked it out on a very granular level as what is the difference. And I also spoke to a lot of other writers and said, how would you kind of how would you encapsulate the difference? I think for me, the main difference, so my first 4 books were psychological suspense, and the 3 Robin books so far, and the one I'm just about to finish, hopefully, are straight crime. So I've done both sides. And for me, the kind of first difference is that psychological suspense is much more internal and personal. And for me, the crime novels are more about a sort of a community and looking outwards. So quite often the kind of horror and kind of fear and tension from a psychological suspense comes from what's happening in the main character's mind, and the personal jeopardy that that person feels. Whereas in a crime story, it's not the crime. Well, first of all, in a crime story, the crime has normally already happened. In psychological suspense, your characters in a situation, or group of characters are in a situation where something bad is going to happen. And so you're working towards that, whereas in a crime novel, you're working out what happened and what are the ramifications and how's that going to impact what happens now. So there's whether you start with a body or whether you're working up to a body is a major difference. For me, crime, and I think our conversation so far has really made it kind of really clear, at least in my case, that when I'm writing crime, I want to talk about things that are happening in communities, that are happening in a broader world, whereas psychological suspense is much more claustrophobic. You can, I mean, literally a room. I mean, think of the brilliant book Room, and also Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent. So much of the kind of the terror of that book comes from one room and what happens there. Whereas I think crime generally, I mean, there's always exceptions, but crime generally has a broader canvas. So I know if I'm starting with a body, I've probably got a crime. And if I'm starting with a, oh my God, this person is, what's going to happen now? They're in such a tight spot. I'm so glad this isn't my life, is psych suspense.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to define it, actually. I've never thought about it like that before.
It was a really fun, and interesting article to write, and we did. As I asked quite a few of crime writing friends, and one of them, Julia Crouch, I loved her responses. I know which one I'm writing by the number of times I have to write to Graham Bartlett, who's my police advisor, and say, Graham, what's the law on this? What happens if? Whereas, I mean, there's a lot more police involvement in crime novels generally. Again, it's not a total hard and fast rule, but tends to be. I mean, it's So you have to get that right, whereas you're much freer with psychological suspense because the whole plot can happen before, before police turn up with the flashing lights at the end. But yes, it's not. You have to know, you have to get your procedural stuff right
Mm.
in crime novels. I think that the standard of, public understanding of police procedure, you would run up against people say, well, that would never happen because they would have looked on the database. Because crime shows, have been so good and so realistic that people have quite good understanding of police work. So you have to get it right. Whereas
Yeah.
psych suspense is, it's much more a straight novel, less procedural.
Mm. That's brilliant. That brings me perfectly onto kind of my next question about procedural detail. How do you balance getting all of that detail and the research right without kind of going too much into it and making sure that you're keeping the story compelling and emotional and everything that a crime novel needs to be?
Um, it's definitely a balance. I I think the important thing, because I think people are interested in procedural detail, but not too much. And so um you need to get the impression across that you know exactly what you're doing so that people trust that this is, so the reader trusts that, this is right. There's, as you say, no glaring plot holes, no kind of, oh, but there would have been CCTV on the high street. This is ridiculous. Um, but so I think you have to, like so much with writing, I think this is, it's not just about the procedural detail that this is true for, but you have to create the impression of knowing all your stuff behind or underneath the surface. So if anybody was to ask you about it, you would know the answer right away without putting, being really laboriously explaining it all, or getting bogged down in it. One really useful way to do that is to use to put in the procedural detail when it serves you. So if there's something that's quite interesting, quite often a problem rather than a solution, but you think, oh, well, if they would have to do that, then you can put that in. Whereas other stuff that people would take for granted, that they're doing house-to-house inquiries and all, you can just mention it and know that you've done it. You don't have to show it. It's, not essentially that interesting unless they discover something in the course of doing that. But your reader has to feel reassured that that is all happening. But you can do that very glancingly, but create the impression that, this is a full and proper police investigation by digging into the bits that help you in your plot, whether that's actually helping your detective or making their life more difficult. But you have bits that are in Risk of Harm, which was the book before Last Witness, the second Robin one. There's an interview, and they hit a guy. They say, we're going to charge you under the Counterterrorism Act. And he's like, what? He thinks, because he's a white supremacist, he thinks, oh my God, I've uncovered Al Qaeda. And they say, no, we're talking about you, sir. You are the one who has been whipping up racial hatred and disturbance, and that comes under counterterrorism. And so I got quite granular on the law in that little interview scene. Because it was absolutely accurate, and it is what he would have been charged with. But it was also fun because I could use it to exploit his prejudices. Like, oh yeah, look what I've done. I've uncovered Al Qaeda. It's like, actually, no, it's you. And so I was that was a bit where I was able to kind of, really get granular, and it's not boring because it's turned on its head. I think one of the wisest things I've read about writing in recent times is from Alexandra Sokolov, who is brilliant. And she says, you can write in layers. you don't have to get it all right the first time. I think if you sit down and aim to write a perfect draft, the thought of it would just be overwhelming. And so you write and then you add and take stuff out, and you can, in that process of refinement, you can see, well, actually, I'm getting a bit bored reading this. That needs to be condensed right down. This can be brought up. And so, it's just really getting to know your book. And you can, luckily, with editing a lot, which I do as I go, that's how I write the layering. And it helps you, when you've written a draft and then you read it and you think, actually, that bit works, that bit doesn't. And then you can calibrate. So then you work out what's boring, what's interesting. But yes, I always try and combine the two, to you use the technical stuff to create plot intricacies, and also, with the question with the law in this book, there is a huge kind of emotional side to it. Sorry, again, a very long and waffly answer, but that's it. You can tell with drafting, I think, is your friend, really. You can, as you draft and reread and draft and reread, you can think, this is me working out that I've got it right, and I can take all that out now because I know that it is correct. So that's covered, but that nobody needs to read all this about, hours of CCTV. That can come out.
Brilliant. That's really fascinating.
Do you find yourself starting with character or with the crime itself? Or does it differ from different books?
It differs. Generally, I have an idea of the character first. Quite often, my husband's a screenwriter, and he always starts with, the big central thing, and I quite often start with place. So I'm talking about a new idea at the moment, and he came home the other day and said, I was thinking about your story, and I had this idea, and he then came up with some incredibly brilliant kind of structural thing. And I said, oh, I had an idea too. It's about a boat ride. And he was like, oh my God. It's like, this is the complete opposite of screenwriting, which is, builds up from structure. Mine starts with atmosphere and place and what a character might be doing in a place, and then the themes that then come out of that. Yes, the Birmingham books, they came about because my dad was from Birmingham. His family come from Birmingham. I grew up about 20 miles away. But our family there goes back. I mean, Whitehouse is a very Birmingham, West Midlands surname, and my family goes back there, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. But my dad died in 2014, and my mum's from the South Coast, and she is very, Southampton, Hampshire, etc. But my dad was brilliant about a sense of Birmingham history, and he was the one who felt very proud of Birmingham as a city. And so somebody asked me what I wanted to write next when I was thinking about what I was going to do after Keep You Close, and I said, I want to write a book about a woman who goes back to Birmingham, and she, in her mind, escaped it, when she was 18, and got the hell out of Dodge, and kind of all sorts of emotional entanglements that she wanted to leave behind, and so has kind of conflated Birmingham and that in her mind as, done, but is forced to come back and reevaluate all of that and reevaluate herself. And so Robin came from somebody who's kind of digging into her personal history at the same time as digging into the history of her city, and discovering that things are not always what you think. So the two are very closely woven through. So that's where she came from. I think it was a bit like I think like all things in writing, it was a sort of an emotionally driven for me by wanting to learn more about Birmingham, because when my dad went, that was my conduit to his stories. Um, and I know that he was incredibly proud of Birmingham, and it's fascinating actually. I'm a bit of a Birmingham bore now. Um, I've actually Robin's dad in the book is a local history fanatic, much more than my dad was. He was more interested in the kind of innovation and the industry and the Industrial Revolution and kind of what Birmingham gave to the world. But Robin's dad is a complete nerd, and I love that. I mean, it's a lovely way to kind of show the city, but it is a mirror for her development. So it's very complicated. Everything, I think the thing with fiction is all the threads, they take ages to build up. And I know my agent currently wants to murder me because I have just missed another deadline. And but I just, yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot of stuff that goes into making these books, and it takes time. But yes,
Yeah.
layers and layers and layers of things colliding all the time.
That's interesting when you saying that about deadlines and going behind the scenes, because I wanted to ask you, you started your career in publishing. So how do you think that's shaped your writing journey? Has it given you any sort of insider
Oh,
knowledge, would you say?
oh, I think for good and bad, really. When I left university, I didn't know that I was going to work in publishing. I thought I wanted to be a journalist because I'd done a lot of student journalism at college, and I loved it, really loved it. But then um, the reality of it is I'm not a news hound. I or wasn't in those days. I didn't feel like that was what I wanted to do, but I also didn't want to do lifestyle journalism. And I didn't feel qualified to write features because, I was still really young and just out of college. And so I had a year, I worked as a sub-editor for a year, for Condé Nast, and I really felt like a square peg in a round hole. And so I left, and a friend of mine was going out at the time with somebody who worked in publishing. And she said, "Why don't you think about working with books? You're obsessed with books. You read all the time." And it somehow, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but it never occurred to me that this was a job you could have. That somebody would actually pay you to work in books. I mean, my God, it was amazing. So it was difficult because as I said, I grew up in the West Midlands, and publishing can be really London centric. And so that was hard, but I started off, I had a job, I answered an advert for a job in the Oxford Times, which was working for an audio and large print publisher. They do the huge, well, in those days they were huge, not anymore. I mean, it's a totally different world now, but at the time, if unabridged audiobook was on 36 cassettes, and nobody bought them as individual customers because they were just so expensive. So it was largely a library market. But it meant all the new books that were published would come in, and we would choose which we thought would be most of interest to library listeners. And it was a fascinating job. I read all the time, all the new books. Just loved it. And on the basis of that, after 3 years, I went to work selling translation rights for a literary agent, and that was how I got into it. So I always feel a bit like I guess I am a publishing insider, but at the same time, I've never felt like that because it wasn't my background, but it was what I sought out. Um, I think it's helpful because it helps you see that publishing is a business, and quite a tricky business these days, to make a living from. I mean, lots of people are doing it, but the changes in the past 20 years have really been huge. Um, uh, it's helpful like that. It's helpful. I mean, I'm sure one of the reasons for my missed deadline is I am a perfectionist, and I think it would be good for me to remember a little bit more that deadlines are also important, and that levels of perfectionism can be kept under control if you consider that you're writing commercial fiction and you have to write to a schedule. And also, as Gillian McAllister says, which I read her saying the other day, which I think is so brilliant, she said, fast writing is not necessarily bad writing. I definitely think that's something that I've discovered, that occasionally you hit one of those windows of flow when you kind of sit down and think, oh, well, I just do this for a little bit. I should think about what's for dinner later on, but I'm just going to have a quick look at this. And then you stand up and 3 hours have passed and you've been somewhere else mentally completely, and it's toast for dinner. But those bits of writing are always the things that I need to edit the least. They come, it's like they come from a different level of thinking. But writing books, because they are so long, they all come from, they're made up of bits like that, bits which are more pedestrian, and then you layer and layer and smooth. But I think, yes, it is helpful coming from a publishing background to remember that it is a business. And it's very difficult because, when you're writing, so much of it is personal, and you do I think, write a book that is emotionally engaging for other people, you do have to put yourself on the page. You have to get a kind of layer of, I don't to make emotional connections. I mean, I always find when I'm reading a book and I think, God, that strikes me as really honest. That's lived experience, and it's what makes fiction so, I don't know, so valuable. That sense of connection with other people. So it is that, but it's also commercial. So it's, like all things, kind of a mesh. Mainly, it is a business, and part of that is that businesses need product. So you do actually have to write. If you want to be a writer, you have to write. And that means sitting down and doing the typing, as Truman Capote would say. But yeah, that's probably the most useful thing. I would say also that I've been lucky enough to meet some fantastic people in publishing, and it is a lovely business to be in from that point of view. The older I get, the more I think life is all about holding two conflicting ideas in your mind at the same time. And I think it's a business, but it's deeply personal. And you just have to live in the discomfort of that.
And what advice would you give to any aspiring crime or thriller writers who are looking to figure out whether they're writing crime, suspense, or somewhere in between?
Start writing it, see where it takes you. Don't worry too much about putting your work in a genre before you know what your work is. I think that crime, psychological suspense, I mean, such a broad church. There's so many different strands. And who knows, you could invent something totally new within it. So I would say use the ideas of what the genre sets out, but only as far as they're useful for you. If you can glean something about, I mean, for example, if you're writing a crime, know that you have to get the procedural right. If you're writing a straight procedural crime, but don't worry about it too much, because if you've written in an enjoyable book, if you send it out and somebody likes it, they will know where it fits, and you don't have to do that part of it, which is quite nice. But it's useful to bear in mind. I mean, if you can tell if you're writing something where there's not huge police involvement, or if you're writing something where you think, actually, I really need to know what the law is on human trafficking, that I need to know what the charges are. It's useful to know insofar as making sure you get things right, but I don't think you need to be in the writing stage. I don't think you need to worry about it.
Fab advice. And what's next for you after? I know obviously Last Witness is published now, and you've mentioned working on another book. So
Yeah.
would you be able to give us a little bit of a teaser of what we can expect from you?
Well, my next book, the one that's just about to be delivered, honest to God, is another Robin. So that's Robin 4. And then I'm going to do something different. I'll take a break and maybe do something psychological fiction again, which is where I started. Um, I'm feeling the urge. Um, so yes, I think that's what I'll do next.
Mhm.
But I'm in the last weeks of a project are always where I always panic and think, oh my God, I'm such a one idea at a time person where, lots of writers seem to have, oh, I've got about 14 ideas in my notebook, but I always have one at a time. Um, and they generally come in the last weeks of writing the one before. And then I've been, oh, that's why I've been noticing all these things. Um, there was years ago, I went to a talk that A.S. Byatt did, and she said that she's got notebooks. She always keeps a notebook. I try. I'm quite disorganized. But I have about 50 notebooks with, 20 pages in them. Um, but she was a very good notebook keeper, and she said she looked back at notebooks sometimes and thought, oh, this is the story that I'd been collecting those ideas for, and I didn't know that kind of what her brain was kind of collecting was towards a project that really her subconscious was kind of working on, that she, had no conscious idea, but something in her was drawn to these things. And that happens to me too. I mean, all kinds of strange things. Like I've got a picture from a magazine on my pinboard here, and I had no idea, but it's actually Robin and Samir. It's um yeah, they became Robin and Samir. It's very strange. I think of it as the human Velcro phase where, you attract things and they stick on you. And then they come to fruition if you're lucky.
Brilliant. Well, we'll
Relate to
make sure that we keep an eye out for the next couple few, however many novels that are going to be around.
Well, fingers crossed, I'll stay alive and write a few more. I'll do my best.
Fingers crossed.
that. So we always like to finish by asking our guests for a book recommendation. Have you read anything recently that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, can I do my favorite book, or one of my favorite books instead? Well, actually, in that case, I'll do two. So, or three. And poor Jane, I've been using her to prop up my computer, hence the movement just then. But Jane Garden, the Old Filth trilogy. People raved about these books, and something about the title, Old Filth, really put me off. I just thought, and it's about an old barrister, and I just thought, God, that sounds so dry. But a lot of people whose recommendations that I really take seriously recommended them. So I read Old Filth, obsessed. I became obsessed. So yes, he's an old barrister, but the trilogy here goes back his whole life, growing up as a child of empire and losing his mother in the first week of his life, and coming to boarding school in England, and then there's this love triangle that is just so poignant. I've read these books. I read them last year for the first time, and then I read all of them, I think, 5 times. And then my husband got me this box set for Christmas, which I now keep on my desk as kind of inspiration of what really great fiction can be. It's just fabulous. So Jane Gardam, the Old Filth trilogy, that's my passion, my favorite books.
Oh, that's brilliant. I've never heard of them, so that's going on the list.
She just died recently, and it was so annoying because I'd actually written to her agent and said, do you think I could send her a letter? And she died before I could finish it.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, I know. I'm so annoyed with myself. Um, but I hope she can feel the strength of my admiration from here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice that we're talking about her today, and we can all go and look her up. That'd be
Yeah. Exactly. So many great books. She wrote quite a lot, and she didn't start till later in life. Or once her children went to school, I think she was, well, were properly in school. I think she was, she didn't start when she was in her 20s. She says that she dropped she dropped her youngest child off at nursery school and then came home and started writing and never stopped.
Wow.
That, yeah, so it was a nice kind of, and this trilogy, I mean, amazing to me that she managed to kind of construct something so complicated, which I think she was in her 70s when she wrote this book. And so you have the whole wisdom of her life, but they're also very young feeling. So she's brilliant.
Yeah. Right then, well, I've just added those to my Goodreads list.
Oh, you have a treat in store. I'm quite jealous that you get to read for the first time.
Oh, excellent. And thank you so much for today, Lucy. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you on the podcast. And yeah, we've loved hearing about the new novel, and that is out now. If anyone would like to go and buy it.
Thank you. I've really loved talking to you both. It's been such an interesting conversation, and such good questions lead to really good conversations. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning into the Write Club. We hope you enjoyed this episode and feel inspired to keep writing. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at Writers Online, your go-to for writing tips, competitions, and exclusive updates. Plus, you'll never miss an episode of the Write Club. Until next time, happy writing!